budget workshop for 2018 to order for Monday, October 30th, 2017. We have a quorum and the agenda was properly posted.
Yes.
Okay. Stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item, item 4, is public appearances. Public's opportunity to speak about any subject that's not a specific agenda item. I don't think we had anybody.
No.
Okay. Item 5 is a presentation to the board by Associated Appraisal Consulting. And we have Dean Peters here and Christopher Campbell, and I'll turn it over to them. They're people who do our assessments, evaluations, and things like that. We've used them in the past. So,
You guys are welcome to sit at the table here.
Good evening. My name is Dean Peters, and this is Chris Campbell. The reason why we're here tonight is just to talk a little bit about the state of the assessments in the village and the revaluation cycle that's coming up here. I want the board to, to understand a little bit about how the assessment process works over multiple cycles, why revaluations are necessary from time to time, what's the impact on the taxes, and kind of what does a revaluation entail. So I'm hoping if you have questions and so on, I can try to answer all those questions, but ultimately it's getting time to do a revaluation, if not 2018, then very, very soon. I think we've been in discussions with Deb, the treasurer, about this for more than a year now, and I just want to make sure that those of you who are making the decisions are informed about it. So last time we had a revaluation village-wide here in Cottage Grove was in 2008. And the Department of Revenue is the regulatory agency that monitors the relationship between assessed values and sale prices and publishes reports and so on to track when assessments are okay and when they're starting to get out of date and need to be updated. The Department of Revenue says that if a municipality is doing maintenance assessment, which is what the village has been doing since 2008, that you need to have a revaluation at least every 10 years. So 2018 would be the 10th year. And if we followed those guidelines from the Department of Revenue, then the revaluation should really be next year. But ultimately, if you look at the bottom line where we're sitting now, the statement of assessment, which is the total assessed value of the Village of Cottage Grove in 2017, is about $655 million. It's all the assessed values added up. And the state, according to their information, says that the taxable value of the village is $711.5 million. So there's a $55 million gap here between what the value of the village is and what the assessments are. And that, I think it comes to about 92% that the assessments are sitting at. So the state looks at it more as on a percentage basis. The state law says that assessments have to be within 10% of market value once every 4-year period. And we're still within that 10% range if we're at 92%, but the way that market values have been going up lately, the real estate market's been very strong. If we don't have a revaluation in 2018, it's almost certain that we'll be under that 10% threshold at that point. Just to back up a little bit, to understand what the difference is between a revaluation and the type of assessment work we've been doing in the years in between 2008. I called it maintenance assessment work. The Department of Revenue recognizes, I think, 4 different sort of scope of services that assessors can perform in an assessment year. If you look at City of Madison, for example, Madison doesn't have revaluations every 10 years because what they do is they just update the assessments every year. They have a big staff of appraisers and assessors who are working every year to keep assessments current with market conditions. So, and they'll visit neighborhoods periodically over the years so that they've visited all the properties over 10 or 12-year periods and so on. But in that case, the assessor is actually keeping assessments current to market conditions. You don't need a revaluation every 10 years if that's the case. But that's generally a far more expensive option for communities to have for their assessment work, and most medium to small size villages, towns, cities are doing the lower cost version, which is to do the big revaluation and then to go, 5 to 10 years with more or less minimal assessment work to keep costs down, and then have a revaluation when necessary. And if you really spread out the costs over that time period, it's much lower cost to do your assessment cycle that way than it would be to do what Madison's doing, for example, which involves a lot more assessment work, more staffing, and so on. So the village has opted to do the low-cost version, have a revaluation when necessary, maintain the assessments in the years in between. And what we're really doing is maintaining the assessments at the same level that they were set during the last revaluation. So that, for example, if a house, X number square foot house in 2008 was worth so much, then houses that get built after that are assessed similarly to what they would have been assessed at in 2008 to keep the assessments relatively equitable. Looking back, the village had, I think, been on more of a 5 to 7 year cycle for your revaluations prior to 2008. And I think the reason why we were able to go longer than that, longer than 5 to 7 years between revaluations this time, is because the last one was done when market values were high right before the recession. The recession was at the tail end of 2008 when it started. So, you had your assessments here, then they dropped for a while, now they're back up again. It just extended the time frame out longer that you were able to go without a revaluation. Part of the issue that's at play here is the equity of assessments relative to each other. And what happens over time is, number one, people change their houses, they finish their basements, or they, build things, build a deck or whatever, and maybe they didn't get a building permit for all these things, or maybe somehow they weren't accounted for. But property values, or properties can physically change over that amount of time, but also market conditions can change. What we saw with the recession was that there was more or less a bubble. Stuff was all selling high, and then the bubble broke, things dropped in value, and assessments were lowered at that time because people had brought in appraisals and people had sales at lower rates, and it was hard for us to justify some of those assessments. Well, now market values are back up. Not everybody got lowered during the recession, some people did, and different kinds of property recovered at different rates from the recession. Condominiums, for example, recovered differently from single-family homes, older neighborhoods differently than newer neighborhoods. So right now what we have over this time period is we have assessments from 2008 and changes made since 2008 that really aren't all apples to apples anymore on the assessment roll. And what that means is taxes aren't being distributed equitably. The only real way to fix that is to just clean the slate, visit all the properties, and have a full revaluation. So I hope that helps sort of understand what that would accomplish. We would be visiting every piece of property, updating the assessment records with an on-site visit. I'm trying to do as many interior walkthroughs as possible to make sure that we have accurate interior information on the homes. But we would also do an on-site review of the exterior information, the measurements, make sure we've accounted for decks and attachments and so on. And then analyze sales from about 2 years, roughly, as a basis for our market conditions, and reassess everybody. Land values, building values, commercial, residential, everything would get reassessed from scratch with the new data that we physically collected in the field and with the new market conditions that we have at the time. And what I always want to point out is that this type of work, it would result in increased assessments on average for all properties in the village, but it wouldn't necessarily mean that property taxes would go up, because the revaluation, you don't need the assessor to raise assessments to get more property tax revenues. The amount of revenue that you collect is based off of the levy itself, the dollar amount of taxes that you choose to levy. And then as far as the school districts and the state and the counties portion, those are all figured off of the Department of Revenue's equalized values. Those equalized values would be the same whether or not we did a revaluation. So the revaluation itself doesn't impact the total amount of tax dollars collected, but what it does is it makes sure that each person is paying their correct fair share towards the total amount that's going to be levied, and that similar properties who have a similar value are assessed similarly and therefore paying similar taxes. So it's really an equitability issue more than anything else. When I was talking to Chris, he found a video, I guess, here that was on the Journal Sentinel. It's just very short, I think 30 seconds or so, that illustrates this kind of the relationship between assessed values and taxes, and I thought that would be a nice little thing to queue up if you could.
I bet you live in a two-story house on a street lined with similar homes. The house next door has about the same square footage, house next door sells for far less than its assessed value. The new owners complain their taxes are too high and ask the assessor to lower the value. Although the state constitution says he shouldn't, unless he's revaluing the entire community, or at least the whole neighborhood, the assessor concedes. He lops tens of thousands of dollars off the value of the house. Now your neighbors, who get the same garbage pickup, snow plowing, and other municipal services as you, hundreds less each year in taxes. And you pay more. So do all the others who did not have their values adjusted. While that single change in value may not amount to much when divided among thousands of properties, imagine if such changes happen hundreds of times, year after year. The result is a skewed system in a state full of tax imbalances. The amount of tax
That's basically it.
All right, well, we had a
Little
little bit
choppy.
of technical difficulty there with the audio, but I think that one of the points that they wanted to show you is that if somebody's assessment goes down and they end up paying less taxes, then everybody else picks up the difference. So there's not actually a loss in tax revenue if somebody's assessment is lowered. It's just everybody else pays a couple pennies or a couple dollars more to make up for it. So what we have after about 10 years of not reassessing is we do have people who are underassessed and people who are overassessed. And if there's anybody underassessed, it means everybody else is overpaying. So really the best way to fix that is to just reassess everybody under the same set of market conditions with new data and get everything equitable again, and hopefully that'll last another 10 years. But I think there's a lot of reasons why it's important to do that sooner rather than later. I guess that's more or less what I wanted to cover. I'm certainly open to questions if any of you want to
Questions for Dean?
ask.
I think it's pretty straightforward there. Thank you for that explanation.
Got a quick one, Jack.
Yeah.
In terms of the cost of getting this assessment done, is there an advantage to doing it for 2018 as opposed to pushing it back to 2019, 2020? Is it going to be cheaper overall to get it done now? Do you have any feel on that?
Sure. Generally, the cost of doing business tends to increase from year to year. Everything from wages to gas prices to insurance to everything. So generally, doing it sooner is going to be lower cost. I think what we did is we provided a quote and we said that it would be good for something like 3 years, which is fairly generous, I think. But it was it 2017, 18?
2017, 18, and 19.
18 and 19. So the same cost would hold in 2019 or 2018. But after that, we'd for sure be looking at some kind of an increase in cost.
Thank you.
Okay. One of the things, the way I understand it is the longer we put it off, when we finally do have to do it, whether we choose to do it or we're forced to do it by the state margins, then the bigger the impact is for those that are being underassessed.
Well, what ends up happening is, the assessor has to mail out a notice of assessment to all property owners that says, here's your old assessment, here's your new assessment, and here's the difference. And the longer you go, if market conditions keep going up, that's going to be a larger number. It might be $20,000 now. If we wait, it's going to be $50,000. We don't know what it's going to be for individual properties, but what ends up happening after a certain point is homeowners get sticker shock and they panic because this increase in assessment on their notice is so big, and they fear that their taxes are going to go up dramatically. A lot of municipalities try to avoid that sort of shock by saying, okay, we're going to try to do the reassessments a little bit more often so that values go up incrementally and not in giant chunks. But really, and if somebody was overassessed for a long time and let me use the other example, somebody got underassessed for a long time and they've gotten used to paying X amount in taxes, and now their property value is really a lot higher than that, and they end up having a tax increase, chances are they're less prepared for it because they went so long without seeing that now it's like they have a short amount of time to assemble that much more in tax dollars. Whereas if these values didn't change in such high percentages, then it's a little easier on everybody, I guess, to swallow for tax increases when they happen.
Okay, so what happens when the values go down like we had in 08? There was just an article today I think in the Wall Street in regards to the negotiations that are going on currently in Washington with the whole revamp of the tax things. And one of the things the homeowners building association, a whole host of around homes are now fighting, is they're proposing on actually changing the deductions for mortgages significantly.
Sure.
And they suspect that if that goes through, which is fairly likely, the whole value, it will go down for homes at least 10%. So if we face something like this in 2019, we get the reassessment done next year, the tax codes, they're talking about phasing it in, maybe 2020, 22. We need to actually come back to you guys and actually have everything reassessed because everything's gone down so far dramatically that we're no longer in line with what the state has come through.
Well, I sure hope property values don't drop 10% for everybody. That's never a good thing for those of us who have equity in our homes and so on. But, you know, let's just say, for example, that happened. The assessments, whenever we do a revaluation, the assessments have to be done as of the physical condition and the market conditions on January 1st.
Right.
Typically, we don't finish the assessment work till late summer or something like that, but we're still doing a retroactive value as of January 1st. It's going to take some time before the effects of something like that actually play out in the marketplace. You know, assessors use at least 6 months up to 2 years of sales data to establish their appraised values. So it's going to take some time before we really understand the long-term impact of that and it starts showing up in the sales of different properties. I don't think that the village can hold out long enough to say 2 or 3 years from now, you know, what's going to have happened as a result of 2018 tax reform. That would be, you know, we'd see that in 2019, 2020 sales. I don't think you can wait that long, but let's just say you do a revaluation in 2018, and then something happens with the income tax code and it causes property values to drop. The assessments are still going to be monitored, and it wouldn't be that different from what happened in 2008. Basically, right. You have your assessment set at X amount. The assessor's job is to maintain the equitability of the assessments and then monitor the relationship between assessments and market value. And then assuming that you know, let's say you went out of the 10% range the first year, I would say, well, we're not going to revalue right away. We're going to see if it comes back a little bit because they give you 5 years to get back out of that 10% range. But you know, that would be a kind of a worst case scenario. I don't foresee that happening. If we lost a couple percent in market value, then it would just allow the assessments to be within that 10% range longer, just like, you know, what happened since 08 when now we have 10 years, whereas I think the previous revaluation was like 2003. That was only 5 years between, or 6 years between 2003 and 2008. And we had already lost, I think, 15% of value in that short amount of time in the 2000s.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Right.
Well, even though Madison, you know, tries to revalue every year, on the commercial side this year, a lot of the assessments were going up over 40, 50%, some over 100%.
Wow.
And so, you know, on apartments, hotels, office buildings. So, I mean, there was a recent article on that. I mean, just the hotels alone, many of them challenged the assessments. Those were dropped, a lot of them were dropped dramatically, which in turn caused the residentials, according to the newspaper, to go up around $9 per home. My thought is, though, on this is that the commercial side is much more likely to challenge than the residential side when you go through this process. And that, so I mean, I think there's just more likely that you'll see more of the commercial side to challenge whatever you come back with your assessments if they feel they're out of line. And they have more basis for doing that too on the income side of the equation.
Yeah, I think you know, traditionally, I was involved in the revaluation in 2008 as well as the one before that, which I think was 2003. And the challenges that we had at Board of Review were mostly residential properties. But you have a point where if you have properties that, for example, they might look like they're great properties, but they're leased property and for some reason they're not doing well in terms of income and expenses, you know, that can be a basis that the assessor has to consider. What we find is that when business is good, we don't hear from the commercial properties. And then when the economy is not so good, they're watching expenses, including their property taxes, more closely. They may even be dealing with lenders and so on and having appraisals of their properties done. And whenever the appraisal comes out less than the assessment, then we're going to hear from the business owners. But at least right now, I think the commercial properties are doing pretty well. Our company does, I think, about 20 to 25 revaluations every year throughout the state of Wisconsin. And we haven't had, an abundance of commercial appeals this year, at least, with the possible exception of the notorious ones, the big box stores, if you've heard about those, who have this dark store argument. And then Walgreens as well has been contesting their assessments statewide. But other than that, you've got a lot of smaller businesses here, and we haven't had a lot of appeals from those kinds of properties this year.
Well, one question. You can, though, assess commercial on you don't have to assess everything in the same year, is that correct? You could do commercial in 1 year, you could do residential another year?
The only time you can get away with doing that is if, let's say the Department of Revenue will monitor the ratio of each type of property, so they'll monitor residential as one class of property and commercial as another. I could use the example, let's say that your residential property was at 95% of market value according to the state, but your commercial property was at 88%. Well, then they would say, okay, if you bring your commercial property up to 95 so that they're both even, we'll let you do that. But there's not that much of a disparity between the two classes here, so really you wouldn't have that option. You have to do everything.
That's really my question, was whether there is a disparity. So there's not.
It's within about 2% between the classes, but the last statistics show that commercial was a little bit underassessed relative to residential. That means that property owners are paying a little extra taxes that the commercial properties should be paying ultimately.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, hopefully this was helpful. Any more questions? Or
Let me get your card, so.
Okay.
absolutely, you're welcome to give me a call during regular business hours as well. I'd be happy to answer questions over the phone. Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Item 6 is discuss and consider 2018 preliminary budget and select a public hearing date for the adoption of the 2018 budget. I think there were 3 attachments in your packet if everybody got those. Not to talk about that, we just discussed the budget preliminary a couple weeks ago. And I think the figures we used, a lot of stuff centers on whether we do this revaluation or not. It changes the dynamic of stuff quite a bit, I think. It impacts.
Not with this, the budget as presented doesn't have, it does not have the revaluation in it.
Right.
But it actually wouldn't change this budget if the board would choose to do the revaluation. At least my recommendation would be to use cash reserves, so check with our financial advisor.
Right.
It wouldn't affect our bond rating. Our reserves are healthy enough to.
Because we did the cable fund conversion, kind of
Right.
have the money available to do that without just paying for it, the normal way. And, I think it's something we need to do. I think if we kick the can down the road, that's pretty much all we do is kick the can down the road, and then we've got bigger problems. I don't know what anybody else's thought is, but like I said, the budget we've got now does not include it. Personally, I'm in favor of including it. If we can do it from a different source, I'll be.
Well, I'm not in favor of it, at least next year, based on, again, the uncertainty of the taxes and the laws that are changing. So we're still within our 90% to 110% ratio. I would say it's an item we put on 2019 and for sure pull the trigger then. That'd be my opinion. Wherever funds come from, it's,
Still have the cable funds then next year.
we'd still have those as an option, depending on how viable that is with the financial folks, but I just think there's too much uncertainty in it. if things fly through the way they do, we're gonna be, a lot of property's gonna change in value because of the way that, you know, the laws will come out. And
Yeah.
folks are raising this concern significantly in the Home Builders Association, so obviously they'll fight tooth and nail to make sure that doesn't happen. So if it doesn't happen, then you just move forward next year with, or in 2019 with the assessment. The price is still the same, which is very generous of the appraisers. And we do it in that fashion. That's my thought.
Kind of the other side of that, though, I think that the market has a much greater effect on your ability to write off some taxes. And when you look at the growth that's going on in the state of Wisconsin, Dane County is getting almost much of the growth here.
I think it's like 60%.
It's just unbelievable
Crazy.
how much growth in the state of Wisconsin is coming right here. And I don't think that anyone that's forecasting is showing that dropping off. And so as the state continues to grow, the state as a whole really is not gaining population, but the Dane County is growing at a pretty sizable rate, which will put pressure on the market for housing, which should in turn cause housing to go up. I think what has a much greater impact really on housing pricing is our high property taxes overall in the state of Wisconsin. I mean, versus other states, your taxes here are much higher, which I think puts a real, personally, I think that puts a real damper on the market as a whole. But you know, we're in a position to still see a lot of influx of individuals coming here, working here, which really high wages really drive property values, I think. And personally, I feel comfortable going forward with it. You know, with going forward with the reassessment. I understand what you're saying, though. I mean, it's hard to predict that when the market will, you know, start to level out.
Forrest? Jim?
I'm pretty supportive of doing this reassessment. Any uncertainty from any potential tax changes and everything. There's uncertainty in both directions. We don't know what effect for sure it's going to have on anything. We don't know if and when tax changes will be implemented. There's uncertainty about the uncertainty. So I figure it's our duty right now to at least let's just get this done. Let's bite the bullet, and you know, let's not kick it down the road for another year or two or however long. Would you
Troy?
agree with that?
I agree with John, and we're within that range of equalized values, and until we get out of that range, I see no reason to go ahead and do it. The last time they did it when values were plummeting and raised everybody's values, and I think we had a much higher turnout than normal when the new assessments came out and people came in to dispute their values. I was one of those people. I got them to drop my value $100,000 after they raised it. It was just ridiculous at the time. But the point being, though, is I think as long as we're still within the range, go as long as we can. It's an unnecessary expense at this point.
James, we were just talking about the evaluation. I don't know if you.
I apologize to everyone.
Not a problem. And we were just kind of deciding, I think Matt and I talked about what the tax would look like without the valuation, and then what it would look like with the evaluation, and it's a little dramatic.
Well, it's hard to get total apples to apples, so if you look right now, that the average home is $250,000. Of course, if a revaluation is done, the average home might be $275,000, $280,000. So it's hard to really get apples to apples, but on it, if a revaluation was done and you still use a $250,000 home to compare to this year, the impact on the tax bill would be the $104 that we're talking about today versus $11 on the tax bill on a $250,000 home. But it would, like, that $250,000 home would likely be more expensive. So, you know, it would be, taxes would be spread out differently.
And even if you do the reassessment, it's not till 2019.
Right, yeah.
So you're not really talking, you can't even compare 2018 when you do it next year or not.
I'm sorry, I didn't know. If you do the revaluation in 2018, it's on the 2018 taxes. Is that what you mean?
No, it'd be on 2019.
No, it's on the 2018 taxes.
Or you
But
wouldn't
the
see it
budget.
till the end of
It's a
2019.
2019 budget.
Right, yeah, that's what I meant.
It's your tax bill for 2018.
Yeah, you're right. But it doesn't affect the tax bill that's coming out in a month or so. That's what I was going at.
Right, yep.
Comment. I'm just doing this through just thinking here, trying to calculate. I just don't see how taking away the deduction is going to really affect property values. I mean, this is a deduction that you get, if you're making, X amount, I mean, it's not going to have that big of an impact. That does not have that big of an impact on the taxes that you're going to pay from a federal standpoint if you take it away from most people. It's just not. And to think it's going to reduce your tax, it's going to drop the price of a $250,000 house to $225,000, to me just seems hard to imagine. And the other side of it is, when you look at the average home being $250,000, try find how many homes are on the market for $250,000. I mean, it's hard to find homes, I would think, in the market for $250,000. I could be wrong in Cottage Grove. I haven't really looked at it recently, but I don't know. I just don't see it. I mean, I think it's fear-mongering by the realtors to try to, the national realtors. Everyone wants to keep every deduction. If you go that direction, there will be no change, and we'll continue just to have everybody wanting their own little specific deductions to feed money into their, into their livelihoods. And I think it's realtors just hyping everyone personally. And that would not be a reason that I would not vote today to go forward with the reassessment.
James, did you have any?
Yeah, I guess I'm inclined to put it off because of the $78,000, I believe it was, that it would cost to have that done. I'm inclined to let it go until we're closer to when we have to do it.
So with that total, that would be coming from the cable fund and other sources. I mean, it's not going to directly.
Yeah, I understand. We don't have to take it off the levy. Yeah, I get it.
It's
But
something
we could
that-
take a whole bunch of things and just put them on that, right? It's still money that we spend.
Mhm. It's still money that we're spending, whether it goes on the levy or not.
It's still money that's going to have to be spent, whether it's.
It will
a
have to be
tax
spent.
or-
Yeah.
It does have to be. But
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be
Eventually.
done this year, doesn't have to be done necessarily next year.
Part of my thought too was, assuming that's the average with 250,000, I guess I'd rather make their taxes go up $11 than 100 and whatever, because everybody's worried about the schools, and nobody really looks at a tax bill and says, okay, the village is only charging me this much. They all look at the total dollar amount. And, personally, we could just have the tax bills mailed from the school district and have their return address put on the envelope, because honestly, that's where the problem lies.
Yeah. Although I heard that it's only going to go up 0.5%.
Well, things have changed.
Oh, really?
They've got, yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, I just got the.
So this is what's in
today.
front, this is what's in front of you.
I printed you out a new 2 front sheets
Okay.
because I have the 2 final assessed values for the village, which is 400.
We had guessed 624, so we were pretty close.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I'm
that
sorry, where are you?
gets
You're on the first sheet?
the
Okay.
copies that I.
Oh, thank
put
you.
out from
I'm
there.
with you now.
Yep. And then also, I got the levy certificate from the school, which is almost 8.5 million. And it only went, I shouldn't say only, it went up like 7,700 over the last year. So,
But what did it go up the year before that?
yeah, the big hike was last year's because of the referendum, but it didn't go up a ton more compared to last year. And then also got MATCs today, and theirs went up about $9,000. So far those 2 have been somewhat minimal.
One of the things I think I remember from last year's budget time is we kind of wanted to put it off because of the school referendum itself. And I don't think that gorilla in the room is gonna go away anytime soon, especially with, on the facilities advisory committee, some people are pushing to even go as soon as next year for a referendum for that, which I don't think is a good plan, but I'm not the one that makes that decision. And I just didn't want us to be in a spot where we don't want to do it because we're worried about what the school's going to do. Matt, did you have a way you wanted to walk us through the budget, or I'll let you go ahead
Sure.
with that?
Sure. So let's do just a quick summary on the process and then the cover memo. And then we'll walk through the other memos that are in the packet, the individual memos. Now that we have the financial management plan established, our budget process follows best practices, which is to establish a 5-year financial management plan. And then it's also a process that is, each department head gets a review, each committee gets a review. The treasurer or finance director gets a review, the administrator reviews the budget, the finance committee reviews the budget, and ultimately the board. And then also new for this year for additional information is that every budget request that's over $5,000 has its own individual memo. $5,000 for the scope of our budget, it seemed like a reasonable figure to choose. Researching other communities, as you ramp up, some use 10,000, 25,000, but for our budget, 5,000 seemed to be a good figure. So, and then with that, just an overview of our tax levy. Last year, it was about $3.4 million. For the 2018 budget, the state would allow us to go up to 4.4 million. The financial management plan has a levy increasing $300,000. For a frame of reference, every $100,000 in the tax levy is about $38 on the average tax bill. The committees and department heads, when they submitted all their requests and they were compiled by Deb, that came in at about $837,000, which was over $500,000 over the financial management plan approved levy. So then I took that and cut that $500,000 out to get down to the roughly the amount of the financial management plan. So that's kind of where we're at now, and we discussed this at the finance committee. There was mainly one significant change made. There weren't any motions made, but we did get some good news on our transportation aid, and that was an increase of roughly $30-some thousand. We'll get to that here, but we added that to road maintenance dollars. So you can look on page 2 of the cover memo. It just outlines kind of by a project name or budget request all of the requests, and then on the bottom of the page, if the item struck out, that's just, you know, my recommendation as far as what I took out and what I left in. On page 3, just an outline of our capital spending. Every year we levy $338,000 towards this program. Some years we spend more, some years we spend less to save. So we make sure that the 5-year plan, we can pay for all of our equipment and project needs. In the plan this year, it's about $408,000. So about $70,000 will come out of that savings account. And then you can see the equipment that's planned to, equipment or projects that are planned to come out of there. There's no planned borrowing to come out of the general fund for 2018. There's a large sewer utility project that's being picked up by the sewer utility and the tax increment district number 7, which is the Old Town area. And then there's a discussion about reserves. As mentioned, our reserves are healthy, and with the shift of the cable fund dollars, we have even more flexibility there. And so, you know, projecting, if the budget is approved as presented, we should be around 38% at the end of 2018. So what, you know, well above our policy. And then I just noted on there, if we, you know, you guys already had that discussion about the revaluation, but just to see what the impact of that would be, the revaluation would likely drop our reserves in that 3% range. And just to conclude on the process, following tonight, whatever the board approves here would be published as our preliminary budget, and it's basically a time period that's set aside for the public to review the approved preliminary budget, and there would be a public hearing scheduled for November 20th, and then the board could choose to approve the budget that night, or you could sleep on it for the first meeting in December, and then but that would kind of be the last night, the latest we could go, because you know, tax bills have to get out by mid-December. So it's just kind of a quick overview, and we'll go through each project here, and I just ask staff to point out when you go over a memo, to point out exactly where in the budget that particular item is. So I'm going to start things on page 1 under revenues, just to point out the increase in the transportation aid. Page 1 of revenues, it's under intergovernmental aid. State aid transportation went up from, we were guessing around 290,000, and it ended up being 324,399. So we added that difference to the street maintenance program. Page 2, miscellaneous revenue, donations from individual and/or organization. That's $68,837 is coming from Monona Grove School District as their payment towards the school resource officer. And as we go through here too, you know, as a workshop, this is pretty informal, and certainly, Jack, I don't mean to, it's your meeting to run, so you can stop me anytime, or if you guys have questions or things you'd like to change, that's fine too. So with that, we can move to page 4. Under municipal court, I just had a notation, looking back at actuals under professional services. We've gone over on actuals there a couple years, so adjusted that to be 8,000 instead of the 4,900 that it's been the past couple years, because we've gone just to make that a more realistic number. And then below that, public relations, that's a new addition, as that was its own fund before, but that was shifted here with the change in the cable fund dollars as discussed. Page 5, codification of ordinances is the only change on this page. Just being that we haven't made many significant changes, we certainly could. There's some years where we do, but that just looking for areas to cut a little bit, brought that down a few $1,000s. And page 6, Deb, if you want to maybe go over the technology items. On the bottom of this, the highlighted portion there, that's zeroed out. There's $13,100. Deb's going to discuss that item.
That was for upgraded tablets for the board and laptops for the staff, department heads. The tablets that we had gotten, I don't know, 3-4 years ago are getting kind of outdated, and this would cover upgraded ones for that, as well as laptops for staff to be able to use at conferences, at home, wherever they may be.
Next, page 7. Main item of note is under elections, and Lisa will cover that.
It was a proposal for e-poll books. The WEC had approval in June to go ahead and build electronic poll books, which would increase the efficiency at the polling place and cut down on the work on the back end of an election, to be able to just upload that information into WisVote. It was projected at $5,000. I just had a webinar on Friday. They put out the kind of prototype of the program, of what it will do, and where they're going with that. They still are working on a state contract as far as equipment cost, but they're estimating between $915 per e-poll book, depending on if we need printers and scanners to go along with that. So those are things that they're working on. They're hoping to have a couple of test places in April and then roll it out in August. So that was what the proposal was in the budget for that equipment to be able to do that.
On page 8, under Treasury, there's a couple more items that Deb can discuss.
The first one under professional services is for an upgrade to the general ledger system. They're called My AP for accounts payable and My JE for journal entry. The My AP, now when staff has an invoice, just to walk you through the process that we do now, if one of JJ's guys goes and buys something at Ace Hardware, they have to get the receipt from Ace Hardware. Make sure they give it to JJ. JJ codes it. He brings it up here to Cynthia, and she does a voucher out and hand enters in the voucher, and then it's included on the bills list. You guys approve the bills list, and then checks are printed out. With My AP, as soon as the receipt is received, it can be scanned in, coded online, and it goes directly up through the approval process and goes right on the bills list. So it's handled a lot less time by staff. There's a lot less risk in losing the receipt or the invoice. So it's a lot more efficient and streamlined process. Then the back side of that is My Viewpoint, which would then allow department heads to drill down. Right now, they don't have access to the general ledger at all. So when they have a question on whether when account seems high, and they want to know, what's all being charged in there, they have to call me, and I go through all the invoices that have been charged to that account number. With My Viewpoint, they could actually click on the account. It would drill down and show them the list, and then they could click on each one. It would drill all the way down to the actual invoice. So it would be much more efficient. They'd have real-time information, and again, save on possibilities of error. The next one, I think,
You
The
probably,
next-
you probably skipped the, or, sorry, what's,
the interconnectivity.
yeah, okay, no, you can go do that. I was gonna suggest that you don't need to redo the reval discussion, you can just
Oh,
get
no.
past that one.
The next one is interconnectivity between the two buildings. So right now, this Village Hall and the Municipal Services Building don't talk whatsoever. This process, and actually, Computer Magic, along with the third-party vendor that they're working with, that are proposing this, are coming to the November 6th meeting to explain this better, because I am not technical. But there would be a connection between this building, wireless connection, and the Municipal Services Building, which would allow us to go from one server, or I'm sorry, 2 servers, which we have now, to 1. The server that the police is currently using is on its last leg. And so irregardless, we have to get a new one there. Servers run anywhere between 3 to 5 years. So we could get one here that would house both. That would also allow for the 2 buildings to be able to speak as far as software systems and phone systems. Right now, when a resident calls here and they say they want to complain about something in Public Works, just kidding, sign up for a Parks and Rec or something like that. We can't help them. We basically have to say, I'm sorry, but you have to call the Municipal Services Building, and here's the phone number, and we can't transfer you. Which seems minimal, but it's kind of a complaint amongst people. They don't understand that we can't communicate between the 2 buildings, and it would be a lot easier for us to know, because the system would be able to tell us, yes, they're in, or not, they're not in, or they're unavailable at the moment, or you can leave a voicemail, whatever the system, contains.
Deb, do you know how many calls we get like that, where we have to transfer from building to building on a monthly basis?
On a monthly basis?
I don't know on a monthly, it's more than what you think.
But that's what I'm
I
trying
mean,
to gauge is.
I can start tracking it if you'd like.
I was just thinking like a gut, I mean, is it 10, is it,
I would
30
say
or
that
40?
it's probably,
I would say 2 or 3 a day.
yeah.
Okay, so it's significant.
It is,
Okay.
it is.
People don't use this, they call.
I can see a lot coming from Parks and Rec, they call about a soccer program or something, and then all of a sudden they
Yeah.
have to call back down there.
Well, I was wondering.
We're kind of the Google for people a lot of times.
Yes. Well, so I was figuring was how techy are citizens or not, or they're still not used to maybe our new website, or maybe we've got some, things that are missing there. Who knows? But I was just curious on volume, so that does answer the question.
Yeah, I think it's probably just easier for them to pick up the phone, and our number is the first one
Yeah.
that they see, and so that's usually what I get for an answer, is, well, I just thought it would be easier to call you. Didn't realize I had to call a different number.
Okay.
But in the budget is still the interconnectivity and the server, either way, because police has to have a new server, whether this happens or not. And this is why they're coming to the next meeting, because the third-party vendor would like to put something on the new water tower. The height of this building is not tall enough for us to be able to connect just from here to the Municipal Services Building. So it has to go to the standpipe water tower, up to the new water tower, and then over. The third-party vendor wants to put something on the new water tower, and this is where he has to explain how it's going to work, but it's my understanding that he wants to get some kind of an agreement with the village to also then be able to provide an additional option for residents as far as internet connectivity.
So it'd be
So
bringing a
he's-
new internet service provider to town, essentially. Right now, we've got
I believe so.
Frontier and Charter for
Right.
just about everybody, and they're not equitable, so. Third option, if that is indeed what they're going for, which that's my understanding as well, that's potentially good for the village.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
so the quote that we've got now, that I've got and I've got in the budget is just for the equipment. He's waiving the labor in the hopes that an agreement can be reached. If we're not open to that and we still choose to do this, I believe the cost, he would probably charge us for labor.
Have we started discussions about how much we're gonna charge for this operator to be on the tower? Or
No.
on the, I mean, that's a revenue source.
Yep. And we used to, on the old water tower, we had Aerodyne, US Cellular used to be on the one down there. So, yeah, it definitely would be, I mean, it's not huge, but it's something. I don't know how much, yeah, again, here's my technical lack, but I don't know how much you can put up there without it interfering with each other or being an issue.
They put a lot on a lot of them.
My parents live out in the town, and they've got a neighbor of theirs, that they have a tower in their field, and they get $3,400 a month for it.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe they should be paying us to do this. Upgrade.
Well, yeah, I don't know. You know, these are all questions that we can definitely ask him on the 6th when he comes. That would also allow for, what part isn't in the budget is new phone system, because in order to connect the two, we would have to get new phones, because our phones are not wireless capable phones. The ones at Municipal Services, they already are on the wireless system, so they would be fine.
All right. Page 9, the main items to discuss are some maintenance items that JJ has a memo on.
Basically, there are two items at the Municipal Services Building and two items here at Village Hall. The Municipal Services Building has NO2 and carbon monoxide sensors in the garage area. It came to our attention last year that the NO2 sensors should be replaced every 2 years. We found this out when one of them failed and was screeching. So basically that is, we can replace those for $4,000 to get all of those overdue NO2 sensors replaced. And also at the Municipal Services Building, I was hoping to bring in someone to take a look at and maintain the metal roof. While the building is newly renovated and beautiful inside, the actual structure is, I believe it's 20 years old. And we saw with Bonnie Road Shop that roof issues, if you don't stay on top of it, can become bigger than they needed to be. And 2 years ago, I had a company come in for $1,500, and they basically assessed and then replaced a bunch of the gaskets on the metal roof at Bonnie Road. And as far as we know, it's held up very nicely. He recommended to do that with any large metal roof. So I'm hoping we can get that done for about $2,000, and I assume it could be even less because that roof is going to be in much better shape. Here at Village Hall, MSA did a facility assessment for us a couple of years ago, and one of the recommendations was replacement of the condensing units outside. They estimated that cost would be $14,000, but there was a note even in that report that possible repair could be done for less. So we haven't looked into it at all yet, but it's just something that's overdue and we should take a look at, as well as replacing the thermostats in here.
Anything else, JJ, on that? Deb has an update on this building. It's not necessarily a big change to this budget, but it's likely a emergency need this year for a furnace. One of our
We had a
4 furnaces in this building.
ADS comes in and does maintenance in the spring and in the fall, and this building has 4 furnaces. The furnace that regulates and heats the main office area, the secondary exchange thing has a crack in it, and that apparently is not fixable. It requires a new furnace. the quote that they gave us was about $3,500 for furnace and thermostat combo. I do plan to get a couple more estimates, just because I'm curious. I have no idea what furnaces cost. But considering that there's 4, one just went out, the other 3 are probably likely to follow. So there's things, you know, as these buildings get older that we have to, it'd be nice to save up for so that you don't get hit in 1 year.
The next page with memos to discuss is the police department on page 11.
The first one was the sergeant position for the police department. When the Moffitt study was done in 2014, they recommended a lieutenant position, which we didn't have, and then a sergeant position. That would give us a 3rd supervisor on the police department, and that person would be on 3rd shift supervising the 3rd shift officers. It would not be an additional position, it would just be an additional amount of money per year to compensate that person for their additional duties. Generally, you want to have your supervisors at 10% above the patrol wage so that there's an incentive for that person to take on the additional fun and all that excitement that goes with being a sergeant. So that one was recommended, and then the other one is the detective position. Currently, we pay our detective the same as we pay an officer. They get an extra 50 cents per hour for specialty pay, and we are highly unusual in Dane County for paying our detective a patrolman's wage. It's normally in the range of the sergeant position, and again, we would, if this is approved, we would compensate that person at a range that would attract someone to that position, hopefully. We would open it up again for competition to make sure we have the best person in there, and hopefully we would see an additional, hopefully production and or someone in there that's a little more motivated, but the current detective can apply for the position too. No criticism intended, but we are not paying that position what it should be at this point.
And then there was another one for, well, no, sorry, Danny got both of those done. Deb, if you could maybe touch base on the police wage line item that's highlighted. Just,
Sure.
there were some other changes that were made in the police department because of the school resource officer and some hiring that was done with administrative assistants and things like that. So Deb kind of has that, that's why that's highlighted on the page there.
Yep. So the wages for the officers, I'm sorry, the wage line is the officers. It's the salaries line is the chief and the lieutenant. Wage line is all the other officers. Last year, an officer was hired mid-year. So the 2016, the difference between the 2017 budget and what's proposed for next year includes a full year of that additional person, whereas last year it was only a half a year. Plus, the school liaison officer was, that program was started, so the officer, that person's off, that liaison's wages are in the 2018 budget in full. But then if you remember, Matt touched in the revenue line, there's $68,000 of revenue coming from the school, which is 75% of that liaison's officers' wages and benefits hitting the revenue line. So you have to kind of take that out of the expense to get a true picture.
I just had I'm just curious, why would the school patrol crossing guards go up over 10% in 1 year? I mean, are we adding one, or we're going from 28,000 to 30,000 on the?
We had one at middle school.
We aren't adding one. We're doing summer school now, which we hadn't been doing.
I mean, the budget's not going up, but the proposal was to increase it by, so I assume that must be another person. I don't know, it's not a big issue, I just curious.
Do you know, Lisa?
No, we're not adding, I mean, we haven't added anybody other than, like Deb said, we're doing summer school that we haven't.
So that adds
So maybe more hours.
5 weeks of
Yeah.
3
Okay.
people.
Anything else on the police there for an hour? Should we keep moving?
That was it.
Okay. The next page that has a memo with it is page 16 into the Public Works Department. And we'll start with the staffing memo.
Essentially, the memo in there, and actually the best thing maybe to go to the little rudimentary org chart at the bottom of the memo on the staffing. Essentially, this is where Public Works Committee for a few years now, and where I personally think we should be headed. And so, basically, I think it's the addition. We currently have one 4-person who handles all of the staff and water, sewer, streets, everything. Village has grown a lot over the last 20 years or so, and I think it's going to be time soon to split duties, basically, utility side and streets side. And so that's kind of how I envisioned the position and then the duties splitting out, with still everyone plowing, essentially working together on any big projects. But it's more complicated than that when I reached out to Deb about what that means for how we pay for things, basically through the sanitary sewer utility, the water utility, and the general fund. And essentially organizing this way would hit the general fund the hardest, while helping the water utility and staying about the same on the sanitary sewer side. So I just basically ran down a quick update. I did do a study from a couple years ago, and I just used the 2 most comparable communities based on services provided and population, Monona and McFarland. And essentially, even if we added this position, we would still be the most efficient using the resident to staff ratio. I believe we were even more efficient than with these 2 using lane miles is another common one that Public Works departments use for comps. But essentially, that's it. If there's any questions on that.
And of course, this isn't in the budget. It's a well put together proposal, but as I'm sure you can imagine, as you've gone through the budget, it's hard to find room for a $200,000 request. However, and I think as you see as we finish up going through all these memos, why it is the best practice to, even if they don't make it in the budget, to still have it be part of the record and part of the budget process, whether it's in or out. So with that, we'll move on to road maintenance, which is on page 17.
Another lengthy memo, and actually since this memo, just last week, I updated our PASER ratings, and kind of what my gut was telling me is true, that
Want to explain what those are, though?
Oh, sorry, yeah. It's a guideline from state DOT, and it's, admittedly, if anybody's familiar with it at all, it's a very subjective rating tool. But essentially, you're mandated every 2 years to rate the condition of your roads based on different criteria, but it's just the amount of cracks. Are there a lot of cracks? You get a certain number. Can you tell that underneath is failing? Do you have a lot of rutting or potholes, things like that? You get different ratings. Typically, best practice is to use maintenance treatments as early as possible, but at a certain point, they don't make sense anymore, other than it's like putting a coat of paint on. It may look nice for a little bit, but it's not sealing out the water. The cracks are too numerous, and it doesn't make sense. What a lot of people think of as a reconstruction is actually, I consider it, and most folks consider it, a maintenance treatment. Would be something like you mill off the top 2 inches of a road that's a 5, a 6, some 4s, and you repave it. like the small sections we did on Southern Grange this year. That was a 2-inch mill and repave. I would like to start doing more of that because we've been doing a really good job as the village has grown, getting the preventive maintenance treatments on pretty proactively. Crack filling and the dark black boiler slag has been the practice here, and I still love that just because it also offers melting in the winter with the dark black coloring. So while that's still feasible, that's the best way to proceed with maintenance. I think outside of large projects where you completely reconstruct the road, it'd be nice to start putting more dollars towards sections of 2-inch mill and repave while it makes sense before the structure underneath fails and requires that you do dig it up down a lot of feet. Also, I just point out in this memo that other communities do let them go like we did in the Seldell neighborhood. It's as much as don't tell the residents there that it made sense because we knew that the water and the sewer needed to be replaced, to hold off on doing that road as long as possible because you knew that you had to excavate to that level anyway. It makes sense. Our utilities typically, with proper maintenance, should last 100 years is the number I use. It may be optimistic, but they should last 80 to 100 years. And there aren't any in the village that should need a whole neighborhood reconstruction of water, sewer, or storm anytime before the roads long since failed. So just like to work towards being a little more proactive. And we are still in a good place if we act sooner rather than later. Essentially, it's what I suspected. The vast majority of our roads in the village are in the 5 to 6 range. Again, it's very subjective. Somebody could go down a road and I gave it a 5 and they could call it 6. But depending on the winters and the springs and other factors, roads can go quickly from one with just a lot of cracks, but it's not popping potholes or failing underneath, to a 4 or a 5 or a 3, a 2, a 1. And then it's patching until you spend the big dollars and completely reconstruct. Any questions on that?
I recall when I used to represent a public works group that making cuts in the asphalt can radically reduce the number of years of the usable asphalt. So trying to minimize those will be very beneficial to us in the future, I would guess.
Yes. Yep. It's water, and freezing and thawing water is the biggest enemy. That's why they're not the prettiest or the most popular, but the best thing to do is when a road's in the first 5, 10 years, if you get on top of it, is to fill those cracks as often as possible. For us, being small with a relatively small road maintenance budget, it's finding enough cracks to get the contractor in where we're not just spending a fortune to bring them here too. So it's a balancing act with everything. But yes, any penetration to that is bad news for that area, and it goes quickly too sometimes.
I personally think not spending money on things like that is very short-sighted. It'll cost us more down the road. It's kind of like having a car. Don't change your oil, just keep adding oil. It won't last as long as if you maintain it.
Well, I guess I just want you to understand, because you guys will hear more, that we've been talking about the plan for next year, Foreman and I, and we'll put a treatment on a road that folks have no issue with because it's best practice. I mean, I believe it's, Minnesota DOT now specs on their large projects that they put the new asphalt down and immediately put a maintenance treatment on it. So people will see trucks there and there will be work going on and look, what are you doing this road for? It's in great shape. But that's because the roads we have had in the last 10 years are still in great shape, comparatively speaking, and it's best to keep them that way with the relatively cheap maintenance treatments. So.
All right, and page 18, there's some stormwater operating budget increases.
Yes. Where did I pull that one? Okay. We have, let's see, we have increased obligations over the past few years, and they actually, they make a lot of good sense in the big picture. Things like the Yahara Winds Group that I'm sure you've all heard, but every community that's a customer of Madison Met Sewage contributes to this program. They use the dollars. Mostly, they have grants and funding for small projects in urban areas, but mostly they're spending the money out with the farmers to reduce phosphorus runoff, that they're required to stop at their plant. And long story short, they have this as part of their permit. They have these programs that we contribute to. If they don't take these actions, they'll be forced to add mechanical means to reduce phosphorus. And you've heard anything. I mean, I've heard billions for that, and then those costs will be passed on to anybody who uses them for treatment. So that's Yahara Wind's contribution. Another one that's just is the League of Wisconsin Municipalities is going to conduct a leaf study, and we're hoping to contribute to that because ultimately the plan there is they're working with DNR, and I believe it's some federal agency to study and model how different leaf collection systems, whether it's just none, whether it's a drop-off point, whether it's all different levels of it, can be scored in your stormwater, which then gives you credits for your reductions when they calculate out all the impacts to your stormwater model. So that, in the long term, helps us too. So those are a couple. What else do we have? DNR permitting costs, just annually for our MS4 permit. And we're going to continue to have, MSA was able to do it this year, and they're going to continue to do our illicit discharge inspections, which meets a requirement of our MS4 permit to basically inspect major stormwater outfalls for anybody that may be sending something to the waters of the state that they shouldn't be. And it also it's a tool for us to have them point out any maintenance issues or anything that's developing even before it gets out of hand, that we can figure out how to tackle those on the stormwater side. Any questions on anything?
Then we have a joint memo between Sean and JJ, a request for some card readers, some additional card readers for security purposes at the Municipal Services Building. So we're kind of backtracking a little bit there, but we'll talk about that.
So specifically our recreation programming space, right now, in the process of that new building, we did not foresee or expect the amount of recreation that we have going on in there. So our staff has a key to the building. And basically that gives them access to anything short of the PD side. So what we're looking to do is to incorporate the card readers back there so we could better control who can get in and who can get out. And then we would know exactly who's in and who's in there at any given time. So it's a little bit more of a security standpoint for us, and not having to hand out keys, which we feel is important. Also incorporated in that there's one door that got missed on the back of the Municipal Services Building that staff uses to come in and out, and again, that would eliminate keys. Fortunately, people don't understand that one key can kind of get you into pretty much anywhere in the building. So we're limiting that. Right now, we either give them keys or they do have, we have a lockbox on the back too that we hand out a code to. It's a small group of people.
Not the police part of the building.
Not the police part of the building, no. Nobody can get in that except those guys. So that's just a security thing that we're looking at doing, or we would like to do to better enhance, our instructors and get them in and out. Yes?
Is that the blue door you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yeah. So our staff comes in and you as well come in and out to that blue door. So again, we're giving them keys to get into that, to the entire building.
All right, and then we'll continue here with Sean into parks and playgrounds, page 21. Your staffing, Sean?
Yep. So just, big picture stuff. We currently do not have any full-time people in parks maintenance at all. As we grow and as the parks that we have age, it's becoming more and more that we need to be proactive instead of reactive to our maintenance. Our playground inspections, our just facility inspections, fence inspections, court inspections, all of that stuff requires me to be out of the office more than I should be probably. And also that position would be somebody that would work in the winter, so it'd be a 12-month, obviously a full-time position, but we would use that person as well to assist JJ in plowing. Or whatever, forestry stuff in the winter especially, which is very big, but it would be, he would act that, or he or she would act as a person that would also jump in and do plowing in the winter as well. So it wouldn't be something that would, people wonder, what is there to do in parks maintenance in the winter? Well, there's a lot of stuff that we could be doing, as far as just preventative, painting picnic tables, getting, doing inside facility stuff. There's a lot of stuff that we could be doing in the off-season that we currently are not able to do.
All right. Page 22, under recreation programs.
Can I just ask a question?
Oh, sure, yeah.
This is just a curiosity question. Why do we have a telephone in Fireman's Park that we're paying like $1,800?
We don't, that I'm aware of.
It says telephone.
I'm sorry, Mick, could you?
Telephone in Fireman's Park, 225.
Oh,
What is, I mean,
yeah, that's, so you're looking at 55, 200, 225, that
Yeah.
line? That's an overall, that's our cell phone account.
oh, okay.
Yeah, we don't have any specific
I
phones.
was wondering where that
Oh.
phone booth was at.
Yeah.
Deb probably should, we'll get that
Okay.
description.
Where does it
It says that on the,
On the description.
Oh, it does.
on the page above, yeah.
Yeah, no, we don't have a telephone there.
Where is that at?
Payphone with rental quarters in it.
Hey, Mom.
And then Public Works and Parks and Recreation shares administrative assistance, so Sean and JJ have a shared memo here with that as well, about adding some hours and adjusting duties.
Yep, so currently, back in 2010, I believe, when that position was filled, it was a 20-hour per week position, and the salary was split, you can see this in the memo, 19% recreation, 15% office, 33 water, and 33 sewer. And what we found out is that that position is doing much more recreation-based stuff as opposed to public works, water, sewer. We'd also like to increase the hour. Currently, as I mentioned, it's a 20-hour per week. We'd like to increase that to 30 hours per week. What that does is it gives us coverage when either JJ's not in the office currently. After 1 o'clock, if JJ's not in the office, Public Works phone calls don't get answered. I don't want to speak for you. And the same thing for if Reese or I or both of us are gone at the same time, then we don't have any coverage in the office, past 1 o'clock. So we would, just looking at re-evaluating that position or reassigning the duties of that position, and then also doing the increase in hours. Did I miss anything?
Fantastic.
I think we'll do, there's gonna be a couple forestry items next, which is not in the general fund, it's a separate fund. If you go to page 24, and then go 2 more pages beyond that, because they're not numbered beyond that, you'll see a whole block of lines that are highlighted, and these are forestry items within the street tree fund. And there's a couple memos that Sean will discuss here.
Which one?
I have a question on 22, though. Are there revenues that offset some of these expenses for some of these programs? Like when I look at football and
Oh, absolutely.
tennis, I mean, this shows the expense side, but there's
Yep.
also a revenue side, right?
Yes, and that would be early on, and I'm not sure what page.
Yeah, it's like,
I guess I-
it'd be like the
In
second.
page 2,
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
with
so
all
that,
the recreation
Must have missed.
revenues.
Okay.
Yeah, later on, if you have other questions, Sean actually could, I don't know if he has them on him right now, but he can break down basically program by program, what we spend, what we get back. Yeah, so then forestry,
which one, do you want me to start with any particular?
either one.
Okay. So I think if it's okay with you guys, we'll start with the memo that talks about reallocation of time. Currently, our forestry position has a 20%. He's 20% forestry and 80% public works. And we've found out that, you know, I've said this 100 times, JJ and I play well together, and JJ's very, he's really good about, we have enough street trees and enough village trees that we're probably in the likelihood of 70 to 80% of the time of his time is being spent doing forestry. So we were looking to kind of reallocate that and make it a little bit more real. Again, the fact that JJ's a good guy is really beneficial, because if I feel like if he were to leave and somebody else were to come in and follow the letter of the law, we've got 20%, so I get him 1 day a week. And, you know, as our trees grow and age, it's a battle out there staying ahead of things. That's probably the #1 phone call that I get is, when are you gonna prune our trees? And, or, you know, how do we handle Japanese beetles and so on and so forth. So just looking to reallocate his time. I think that what we initially asked for was a 70%. I think what Matt put in the budget was a 40%. Deb, is that correct?
Yes.
A 40% reallocation of his time, which, you know, it shifts money from the water utility into the general fund.
Yes.
So that's where that 31,000 is not correct at a 40%. I don't know, I don't have that number. Do you have that number?
I
But-
don't have a total off the top of my head.
Yeah. So again, just looking to be real and being able to maintain what we have out there and kind of stay ahead of the game.
So is that number gonna be more than the 10,000 in the adjusted?
No.
Nope. What's in the numbers in the budget now is 40%.
Okay. Thank you.
The second memo that I had in regards to forestry was our operating supplies and expenses. You can kind of read in the memo, I kind of broke this down a little bit, but basically what we're seeking that increase for is to continue to treat our ash trees. We made a commitment in 2015 to, you know, get away from the, let's clear cut them and knock them down and eventually replant and try and treat some of these, or all of our village trees. We've done that, and we're seeing success in the trees. The crowns are coming back, and as long as we can stay ahead of that evil little creature, we feel like we can save these trees instead of having to cut them down. You can kind of see the impact, you know, over the course of the next several years, what it could cost us in removing these trees and then replanting them. And then there's also the environmental benefits of a large tree that's there, you know, 11-inch tree right now, and replanting that with an 1.5-inch tree until it gets to be what it once was. So this request is just allowing us to continue to treat what we have and hopefully get rid of that little creature. As you well know, it is in the village, it's in the entire county and most of the state, but we feel like we're moving in a good direction with our treatments.
All right, with that, we can turn back a couple pages to page 24. There's a series of memos that are all basically tied together for an economic development project, and Aaron's going to talk about those. We've been discussing this at the CDA.
Yes, this is a group of 4 projects intended for the land up north of I-94. Would include funding for an annexation application, an urban service area amendment application, creating a TIF district, and then going through MADREP's site certification process. Typically, a lot of these steps are driven by the landowners when they have a project ready. They would pay for the annexation in the urban service area. In this case, the people who own the land up there, they're not developers, they're not experienced with these processes, and these tens of thousands of dollars may be somewhat of a detriment to be getting some of these steps done. So I think by the village paying for some of this upfront and kind of lending a hand, guiding, working with the owners and guiding them through these processes. We can take a lot of steps to get to a point where the development of this land is much more feasible and more likely to happen sooner than later.
And currently, this is in the budget, but not on the tax levy as a one-time project. And this was also discussed with our financial advisor, was to fund this one-time project with cash, and certainly to attempt to recover from the landowners. This was discussed extensively. I don't know, Mick, if you want to talk about that portion of it anymore, about the discussions at CDA about trying to recover some of the money. But I think overall the thought was, or John too, a CDA member, but the overall thought was it's such a big, important development for the village to be proactive and just get going on it, was kind of the general thought.
Yeah, it's actually one of the few interchange properties that are available. And that's the discussion we really had at CDA, to kind of get that, as you said, jump started, to get things in step so that if an opportunity does come, that we're ready to go and we're not looked over for another particular site. So that was really, we thought it was a prudent investment to take as a community, because that's really going to drive, growth, as well as, saving a little bit on the tax dollars of residents and providing more services, hopefully.
The village's overall, assessed value being at about $650 million. The scope of development that could be done out there would be on a low end, 200 million to 500 million plus. So that's the kind of scale we'd be talking about. So when we're discussing $40,000 to get it kind of shovel ready and ready for development, it seemed to be worthwhile.
If we don't get that back from the property owners, can we create a TID? Can we, if we spend it first, can we get it back?
We can. Yeah.
Get back in spades.
So that concludes the budget requests, and anything over 5,000 is being requested in this budget. I know you all had the budget about 2 weeks now. Maybe Jack, up to you if anyone has either questions or maybe items that are in that you'd like cut or anything that you'd like changed.
Anybody have an opportunity to go through there, and we can certainly take turns. I mean, Matt and I discussed it a while back, and any thoughts on it? Any comments?
Do we just want to start with some of the line items? You want to go?
I guess if you find something on page one, let's all go to page one to make sure we don't backtrack.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything on this.
Whatever, yeah. Okay. Anything on the next few pages?
I mean, I guess I was looking at, based on what you said earlier about the potential for the connection between buildings. My first thought was we could put it off, but if there's a potential for a revenue stream on this, then
Well,
that's.
It is out, isn't it? Is that in?
The
That's in?
phones, the phones are out.
The phone-
The phones are out,
It's
but
a
the
portion,
connectivity
yeah.
isn't.
Got it.
Right.
Just
Sorry.
5,000.
I'm sorry.
Because PD's gonna need a new server anyway, so.
Right, well, my thing was about the potential for the revenue,
Right.
I don't know what that is. That's a question I think would be a nice thing to understand, because if there is a revenue stream, let's actually, my opinion would be, let's do that. If it's certainly something that can offset this expense fairly quickly and offer another service to residents, which would be another big plug, other than the 2 or 3 that are available. That to me is intriguing.
What is the tower rental income that we're getting now? What's that coming from, cell or?
Actually, that one is still at the old site.
It's a lease. It's a land lease.
Oh, okay. It's a land, it's just a land.
It's just a
lease.
land. That's why it's not as not as much as otherwise it would be. But it's, they've changed their name a couple, or it's been bought out and reassigned. I believe it's SBA Towers owns that, and if the board's interested, and it's kind of a tricky thing. We've been warned by other communities and other providers that once in a while you get these people that will come in and they'll try to buy you out lump sum, and they're pretty, we can bring them forward and have a negotiation there, but generally speaking, people tell you to stay away from these deals. They tend to be not worthwhile, but we can bring them forward. But.
Well, the question, are we negotiating yet with the firm that wants to go on the tower? Have we started that negotiation?
No.
They're presenting though in
Yeah, I'm not
November.
even positive exactly what he wants.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I'm not.
Okay.
so we'll feel them out then.
Probably.
Okay. Not that it's all.
Yeah,
Just wanted
well,
to-
that is another point. If it goes on the water tower, which is an asset of the water utility, the revenue would go to the utility.
And that's the plan, right? That it would go on the water tower.
When we had that before, the revenue went to water tower, it's called the water tower fund, and it's money that was saved up for repairs on the water towers in the future, painting, sandblasting inside, that kind of stuff.
I mean, ultimately, it would help residents.
Yes.
Keep your rates down.
Do we get, in the cable fund, do we get revenue off? How's the cable fund really, how are we getting money off the cable fund? What is it based on?
It's franchise fees from Charter, and it's based on residents,
Revenue,
The
right?
users.
the
amount
users,
of
how many users. So over the years, it has come down.
So my hunch is that you have a revenue stream that's, one that may go up. You may get more money in one fund as the other one goes down. So I think we should keep that in mind, especially cable long-term. I think it's getting kind of shaky as to want to rely on that income stream.
Any other line items anybody wants to bring up at this point?
If we go to page 3, capital, more on
Hey, what?
page 3, capital equipment. I'm just looking at Matt's memo. This point, not this level thing.
Oh, yeah.
So,
And the detail of that you can find on the very last page of the budget.
yeah.
That says, okay.
No, I was just being mindful that in future years, we're gonna have to start putting away for a tanker for the fire department.
Mhm.
I told Matt that, whether whoever's here, we're gonna have to start thinking about that.
So what will happen there is that the $338,000, that's the amount that we know over 5 years can cover all of our equipment. So, we'll need to increase that amount to maybe 375 or something like that going forward to make sure we can cover that, or whatever it ends up being. But we also might get some, depending on the Pleasant Springs revenue,
Yeah,
might offset some of that.
and I think that agreement's up next year, I believe. So that'll be a telltale sign really of how much we'll need.
Mhm.
And then, what is it here? I'm assuming the front end loader is, or the end loader is at an 01 is being used quite a bit. That's not something we could, lease or something of that sort, or is it?
There was, I've been reaching out to vendors. There is one that has a lease option. It's still pretty pricey.
Okay.
And then I guess he said the one municipality he had it with in the area, they opted to buy it after 3 years, which then essentially it looked like they didn't save anything doing it that way. So it is an option though, and I could reach out and see if it's options with other places too. But it didn't look like it was that beneficial.
Well, I'm assuming if the next one lasts as long as this one does, then probably not. And I'm assuming that we're using it for all sorts of things, whether it's snow removal. I've seen it everywhere, so.
Yeah, it's a versatile piece of equipment.
Yeah, cleaning up all the leaves out of things. Like I said, I've seen it. Or I was just curious.
Would you say we get another 15 years out of the next?
That's a big number, but I would.
And I'm just asking, if you amortize that over 15 years versus if you're going to replace it in 8.
Well, and ideally we'll use it less hours too, as we've kind of diversified the equipment we have now to be more appropriate for the uses. You don't always need to take the big giant payloader. So yeah, I mean, don't come back in 15 years and be really mad at me if it didn't make it, but it should. They're generally, the 10-year kind of life, but again, that's a ballpark nuance, depends on a million different factors. So I'm pretty confident, I'm more confident to say yes on that one than in most pieces.
And in 10 years, and again, you don't know this specifically, but would the thing have a residual value of 50 grand, 20 grand?
Yep, no, and that's what the couple folks I've reached out to already. I don't know if there's anything formal yet, but I think in 15, 16 years, they still hold around 50 grand. Wow. And one that's particularly beat up, unofficially is probably around 50 grand.
And the reason I'm asking is that comes back to, is leasing going to be cheaper than actually buying it,
I think, I didn't long too deep, but long term, I think I don't see it on this particular piece of equipment because they do hold a pretty good amount of value. They last a long time, and basically not too many folks are doing it yet. So.
Ultimately, if you're leasing, you're still paying finance charges, and we could borrow money cheaper than they're going to finance that money for a leasing company, and we've decided we don't want to borrow. So,
I get it.
Yeah. That's clarification. And the police squad car replacement program, that's just a continuation of the 2 squads we got last year, right?
There were, there were 2, it's a continuation of the leasing program.
Okay.
Starting in 2019, we'll go back to buying most likely. And I mean, I guess I'll leave it up to Chief to make a proposal, but
this is just
we'll come in likely under that 43,000 that's in there.
Okay, but this is for the current equipment we have. It's not something.
There's an addition of 1 lease in there.
Oh, there is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're at the end of our 2 years now of lease to own. So next year we'll own free and clear the 2 squads we got 2 years ago, and then lease 1 more in 2018.
And we have to, we're retiring maybe 1 or something like that, or something?
We'll keep them, the
Okay.
one we have, but put it out of service, because with 13 officers and 7 vehicles usually isn't enough, because 2 are unmarked and for special events, and when we're out all on patrol for, the surveillance we've been doing lately, we're running short on cars.
Okay. Yeah, it's just more of a clarification. I understand that. Thank you. The other thing I had on here, sorry, I'm going through my notes. Conservancy Court wetland scrape. I'd like to see something in there that we tie enforcement of our ordinances when it comes to runoff for the property that is now in the village that is likely.
Since it's been annexed, there's no reason we can't enforce the runoff from upstream or whatever.
So, yeah, the reason to do that is obviously we're going to make this investment. We don't want to make this investment very soon, again. So let's address the problem where it came from and enforce whatever that is. So that would be my only caveat on that particular item is, let's do it, but then let's address the runoff coming down there. And if that means they have to put ponds in, they have to put ponds in.
Just like every other developer. They
Right,
put a
and-
retention pond.
Right, and it'll help them if and when they develop, but they may have to make the investment earlier rather than later.
And that recommendation for what's gonna be the solution probably should come from MSA.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. I would defer this to MSA because, you know, they know, they're pretty familiar with what's going on there, and they're certainly aware of what probably needs to be done. So that would be my own comment. So that, again, we don't have to dump another 100,000 in 5 years because a big giant storm came and washed a bunch of that farm field back into that spot.
Any other thoughts on conservancy court? Okay. Anything next, John?
Nope, those were the things I had.
Okay. Forrest, anything?
So if I was to propose something like adding the revaluation back in to the budget, how does that work? Because right now it looks like we're kind of split 50-50.
I think we are as far as our opinion of putting it in or not.
Right.
Yeah.
So when it comes, you know, if I request it be added back in, is it something we vote on to add it back
It'd
in?
be- somebody would second it and then we would vote.
Okay.
And it doesn't, it would probably be at the final board meeting then when we adopt the budget at that point.
Well, it'd be discussed again, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so then, will we have our tiebreaker, our seventh member by then? At least are we
Good question,
anticipating?
I don't know. Yeah.
Should.
I think
Well,
so.
the last times that the board has filled a board position, you've held the interview and then made the decision, and they literally can come and sit, they're on the board right away. So whether they're prepared to make, you know, who knows what they would do, they might abstain. You know, it probably depends on how much they're following along individually with what's going on. So it's kind of hard to say what they would do.
Sure.
So at this point, I mean, moving this forward is just a recommendation to a village board hearing, is that public hearing?
It's publishing a preliminary budget for the public to review.
Other than the revaluation, does anybody have anything else, any particular line items that we feel we should question at this point? I think Matt's done a good job of cutting things to try to keep it within our financial management plan.
Would anybody be supportive of upgraded laptops for staff and nothing new for board members? If we were to maybe redo that second item, the new upgraded laptops for board and staff?
I mean, I think it makes sense because I've got one of the tablets too, but I need a mouse, it's just not user-friendly for, if you're used to a laptop, so I bring my own and I'm happy to turn mine back in, and I would just as soon give them to staff so they could use them probably more efficiently and more often.
I use the tablet. I don't really have any issues with it, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, if the staff needs or, you know, would like newer laptops, I mean, in my position, I don't think the board needs any upgrades. So is it possible for us to find out what that number would be if it was just for upgraded laptops for staff members as opposed to board members? Because right now, $13,000 for upgrades, which is not currently included. I see you struck that off.
Yeah.
But yeah, that could be figured out. The ThinkPads, or sorry, not Think, the what are they called, Deb? For the ones for the board members.
Oh.
They're much cheaper too, because they're basically just to view, you know, to access the internet, and so they'll be much cheaper. But Deb has those quotes and could pull that up.
I'm a bit of a tech nerd, so I'd kind of be interested in seeing those numbers at some point.
And I guess I'd like to know how the average citizen in the village is gonna benefit from new laptops for folks or technology.
I don't know that a citizen would, but I think staff would be more productive if,
I think it's the same as anything else. You know, it has the ability for the staff to work more efficiently and more effectively in the job that they're doing. It's just like any other office supply that you buy or any other piece of equipment that you buy that citizen might not individually gain anything from it, but the overall picture of running the business of running the village gains.
I mean, it kind of goes back to like the interconnectivity issue. If I wanted to call here about something and I was told, don't gotta hang up and call there, I'd like, what are you guys doing? And
That's more of a problem than the
Yeah.
laptops, I think.
Nick?
Are we in any way addressing the 5,000 square feet we're going to get back at the municipal building this year or next year?
I don't believe we have
Not,
anything.
not in here. I mean, that was
I guess
kind
I'm
of,
asking why. I mean, if we're going to get it back, it's going to be hopefully used for something in 2018.
Right.
Which means there would be some sort of expense that more likely would need to be, you're going to have some tenant
Yeah.
improvements of some sort, even if we use it for our own use.
I mean,
It seems
I-
like we're not, it seems like this is going to be an amendment that comes back sometime during the year.
Is there anticipation of using that for rec or?
We'd like to, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And could we get greater revenue out of that?
Yes.
So,
Yep, I mean, we have two entities that use that facility. One is our cheer and tumbling program, and the other one is just our adult fitness, and both would like, we run adult fitness Tuesday and Thursday, and cheer and tumbling on Monday and Wednesday, and both would like 4 days a week. You know, so if we had the capability of using two spots, we could certainly.
So there wouldn't be an expense to tear out a wall or anything, you could just use the space.
Yeah, we'd have, because the additional space is literally double what we have right now.
Okay.
So there would be, you know, and I'm working to try and get some numbers together from contractors just to do some basic improvements there, you know, some painting. And the largest expense that we would have if we chose to use that room would be the flooring that we have.
Okay.
The flooring that we have in our current room was about $5,000, so it would probably be about 10 to use that entire space. We wouldn't have to necessarily look at using it. That would be the largest expense.
May to address your question, my thought was, I was looking to see how that entire building would be, you know, eventually expanded and how it would best be utilized. And, you know, kind of evaluating that with the land next door at the Bonnie Road property, Village Hall, kind of all together. And I realize for the Parks and Rec space that, you know, you wouldn't have to, doing the Parks and Rec space wouldn't deter something greater from happening, but anyway, I was looking further down the road to plan for all the facilities. And
I think where the tenant is now, you've got the main building, then a tenant, and then another vacant area, is that correct?
there's an unfinished 5,000 square
Yeah, so
feet
it's
at the
kind
end
of-
of the building.
We're utilizing that a little bit,
Right.
not quite formally, but we have our unofficial meter shop for
Yeah.
meter testing and storage and things like that.
If you can use it without bothering the tenant and whatever, yeah. Once they're gone, then you've got.
But I was basically just thinking, instead of, you know, individual departments making requests kind of seemingly randomly year to year, that we figure out how best we want to use that building and when and how and that sort of thing.
Okay.
I mean, my
But-
comment is we may have it back as early as beginning of the year. I mean, it's
Mhm.
hard to say. And the tenant improvements, you're probably at least $5 a foot, I don't know, for flooring. Put in
And
there, so
if
something we're not budgeting.
we'd be not looking, you know, to do major overhaul to that space just for, basically for what Matt had just said, that we don't know what the big picture is and how we'll utilize that. So anything we would do in there now would be minimal, just to kind of pretty it up a little bit, because it is pretty industrial in there. So, yeah.
Lisa, a quick question for you about the electronic poll books. Is it possible to do kind of like a split where we would do maybe a trial run with one station having an electronic poll book to check people in, and then everybody else doing the traditional? Or is it kind of an all or nothing upgrade when it comes to
The
that?
point, because of the splitting of the alphabet, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
I would have to check with the WEC if that is a possibility, but I certainly can do that.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be feasible or even worthwhile doing. I'm just, when we had talked,
When you gave us that more complete explanation, you said that's one of the advantages, though, is the people don't have to line up by their name, right? You can
Right.
just pull them up.
Right.
So they'd be more productive, and it could potentially put off having to get a second polling place, right?
Correct.
So, I mean,
Correct.
we're definitely going to be doing it, it's just maybe not next year, this year. It sounds like it's not going to happen until August anyway, right?
It's not going to happen until August, and then that's when the official rollout. I was hoping that we could be one of the test communities, just
Yeah.
because I've worked with them to do the pilot so that we kind of get everything, our wish list,
Yeah.
in there, so that it's working to what would best suit, the voting experience plus help in efficiencies on processing those election results. Certainly can look into that for us.
Sure.
We would have a good opportunity in February. There's most likely going to be a primary, and then we'll have an April election. Those will probably be lower turnout, so it would be a good opportunity to maybe do some of that testing. They haven't picked who the communities are yet, so we may get picked. So it may be, something that could happen.
So I've got two thoughts on that. The first is, if we are able to split it up, if we could do an incremental rollout, it might help with some of that sticker shock. The 5,000 as a whole in the budget is not that significant. But I know some people might look at that and say, do we really need that? My other concern is, since it is kind of a pilot program that's just being rolled out, it might be beneficial to wait until next year to see how well it's adopted and supported, how other communities like it, and then jump on board once we have a chance. So I guess it's all kind of dependent on if we can do an incremental rollout, and then whether or not we want to at that point.
Yeah. I can tell you, after viewing the kind of prototype on Friday through the webinar, I'm very excited about it because I see great benefits, not only for the poll workers, but for the voter and themselves. I see that it is going to help cutting that timeline down for their voting experience, but more so on the back end of elections, because it's going to be basically uploading that information into WISVOTE, which now I manually enter all of that information in. It's going to have the capabilities of even doing more. These are just the first processes, so it's going to be doing voter registrations as well as voter check-in, and then if we would have provisional ballots on election day for anybody that didn't have their correct voter ID. But they do have in place for doing enhancements of having it build and move as the election process moves along. So, I think this is, just the first steps, but I do feel that it's going to be a great benefit for the community.
So it's not something that it's going to go away if things don't work out. It's something that might change and evolve over time, but it's around, at least from what you understand.
We're going to be doing it. Right now it's an optional thing, but like you say, Jim, I see that it will move forward probably quite quickly, because I think it's going to be a great benefit. I think it's going to be a great program. And the fact that the WEC was able to build it within their organization, that is saving a ton of money rather than going out to a vendor, because what happens in that situation is you have a limited amount of people. They have to go through federal standards, state standards, and that cost of that equipment just goes skyrocketing. So I was very excited when they got the permission from the commission to do that in-house, because there is no cost to us as far as the software of it. It's the hardware portion of it. Plus, then we get the backup support from them, which, in my opinion, they're second to none. It's a great agency, so it's a win-win on both ends. And I do think that it's going to be coming to our future quicker than what we think. You know, it's not going to be mandated in 2018, but I would venture to guess that it probably will be in 2019 if it continues to move as it is.
Is there a way to take, you know, the first two items, the upgrades to the technology and the electronic poll book, if we decommission our board tablets, something like that, could those be used in order to satisfy the hardware requirement for the electronic poll book, or at least some of the hardware requirement? So like, once again, just trying to bring that number down to make it possible, and then we could always talk about
Right.
upgrades in the future.
And we do have a few tablets, and that was my hope, and we haven't gotten the specs yet, and I keep asking them so that I could get that number crunched down just a little bit, what the requirements are. On Friday, they still weren't able to answer that, and that was one of the big questions that everybody kept asking. It's not only the tablets or laptops. What they're looking at is the possibility of scanning somebody's driver's license, so that information would be uploaded. So it would be a scanner and possibly a smaller Dymo printer, so that when they're registered, you all get that card right now, so that you have your voter number, and then you go over to the ballot table, and that tells them your number, and then also tells them the ballot styles, which is going to be another issue we're going to be facing because of how our wards are lining up and changes within Senate districts. So we're going to have different ballot styles. So it becomes more confusing to the poll workers because you probably don't know what your ballot style is right now. If I asked all of you, you probably wouldn't know. And what that would do is it would print out a label, would give them their voter number, and it would give them their ballot style. So then when they get their ballot, they're voting on the correct ballot. So the package is kind of like a two-step process. They're trying to work through that. One of my main questions was, well, if we're using tablets, why can't we just use the camera and not have a scanner? Well, there's a little bit of technology that goes behind that. So they're still working on all of that. So it just depends on where it all shakes down and what type of equipment we're going to need to be able to do it. You know, my hope is that the tablets that we have, we can absolutely utilize, because you're talking about using them, you know, 4 to maybe upwards of 6 times a year if you had a recall or something of that nature, a special election. So it's not like it's going to get utilized, you know, every day, but yet you still need it on election. And depending, they're projecting that you need one polling e-poll book for every 1,000 registered voters. So, you know, like right now, we would be at that cusp of 3 to 4.
And if we were to put this back in, something that could be paid for with that cable fund money, or something just, I'm supportive of things that help increase voter turnout, make the process easier. If we are able to reduce lines, if we're able to avoid a second polling location for as long as possible, which is another increased cost, you know, I'd like to see this put back on.
So what it does eliminate, like, sometimes they'll come in here and see 20 people in the 8 a.m. line, but nobody in the end to whatever, and then other people are sitting there like waiting for somebody with that name to come in.
Right, that eliminates that. We would
Yeah.
no longer break our poll books out into those 3 or 4 different splits.
Okay.
They could go to any line, so therefore it's going to be quicker for somebody to
So
come
the voters
in.
and the staff would be happier.
Yeah, and it eliminates errors,
Yeah.
you know, in a lot of ways.
For us to answer your question, it's to be used for one-time capital purchases, mainly Fund 410, which is where most of our equipment and other large projects would be in there. So, you know, the short answer, I guess, is no. It would be deemed as operations and would not look good on our financials.
Oh, that's fine. It just,
Yeah.
I figure we're throwing everything else at the cable fund. We might
Sure.
as well.
It's not going to be, so once they get dispersed into our reserves, you know, you can't differentiate the cable funds from the unrestricted reserves anymore, so.
just was looking at the key card reader, and it kind of ties in what Mick was saying about improving the space, that incremental space that we get. Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, the revenue that we're projecting from the rec programs, is that on the conservative side? I mean,
Yeah, we're projecting about a $17,000 increase in revenue for next year. And yeah, we try to be a little bit more conservative with that in case something
Yeah.
bad happens. But
I don't know, I guess what I'd like to do, if we can, is as soon as possible, if that revenue is trending higher, is potentially utilize that to get that key card taken care of and get the space improved, so that we can generate even more revenue, right? I guess I would like to see that. I don't know whether we can make a change, if you're comfortable making a change now in the budget, or should we just do a wait and see on the revenue? I mean, how quickly does revenue come in? Of course, is the spring, is it heavily loaded in the spring, or?
it's
I don't know.
throughout, it's
It's evenly
basically
spaced?
seasonal, yeah. We'll, just for example, we see a lot of expenditures this time of year for basketball, but our revenue doesn't come in until January.
Ah.
So it's throughout the year.
I mean, for the tumbling, you already have a floor that you would just move over there, right? So I mean, part of it, part of the issue now, where we're at with behind the blue door, is that we have a quarter of the space that's, or at least 20% of the space that has flooring that's just stored there, that's brought out later for tumblers, I assume, right? Or somebody. I mean, it's a sprung floor that
Yeah.
it's over in the.
Correct.
If you take that, so we already have a portion of the floor that you would need for the other space, correct?
That, let me make sure I'm answering your question. That part of the floor, yes, that is specific for tumbling.
Because the floor that we are now storing, that portion of the floor over in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, so we already have enough flooring to finish out the one spot if we take the other floor out. So I mean, really, it's looking at whether we want to expand the additional space for some other use other than tumbling, or expand the tumbling space.
Correct.
But we could gain 20% more right now
Okay.
behind the blue door, which we're pretty close to capacity now
Yeah.
in there, if not at capacity.
So you had mentioned one of the concerns with having the universal key open up the blue door. Could we maybe just change the lock on just the blue door and then have it different from everything
We
else?
could,
And
yeah.
at least as
There's
a
an expense to
stopgap
that
measure?
too, but yeah, not $3,000.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
The thought process would be to get rid of keys as a whole.
sure, but at least in the
Short
interim,
term,
just,
yeah.
just to increase, at least.
Absolutely.
Work on some of your concerns.
Absolutely.
And would that be something you'd want to try to find the cost for and include in the budget? I'm sure it's probably very
$300.
minor.
Yeah.
So,
It's about $300
okay.
to do that, yep.
Anything else?
I had asked a couple of questions at our last finance meeting as to what we spend on legal and MSA a year for engineering. If we're writing any state contracts, if we checked in any of that, and I guess I haven't heard anything back.
Right, Deb has that she can hand that out.
So there's information on legal and MSA engineering. Sorry. And they have 2016, all of 2016 for both, and then what has been booked through 2017, which both of them stopped at June.
So as far as legal, the line item general is not something that's passed through or reimbursed, but pretty much everything else is? Is that-
Right, if you look down at the bottom,
Okay.
and I'm looking at 2000, just use 2017. So far, of the 91,000 paid out, 55,198 has hit the levy.
Okay.
The general line, which would be general and proposed annexations and, anyway, that's 46%. The
Okay.
due froms, which is ones that we've charged out and are paid back by developers, is 35% of the total. Port is 11% of the total.
So through six months, we've done double the number. We'll do $180,000, $200,000 a year in legal fees.
Yep, if you look at 2016, we paid in a total of 200,000. Of that, 35% was due froms, 38% basically hit the levy, 23% was utilities.
So there's a lot of this that's just passed through and you wait, 2 or 3 months, whatever, for reimbursement, okay.
And then MSA, the large part of MSAs is projects that we've been borrowing for.
Yeah, so we've spent more this year in 6 months than we did
Yeah.
all of last year, basically, or just about the same dollar amount.
But we have Seldall going on,
Yeah,
we have
yeah.
Highway N and School Road going on, some Gaston Road still trickling in, so, yep. A very small portion of MSA expense actually hits the levy.
And are we following writing any state contracts or state contracts available for engineering like that? And legal?
I don't know anything about that.
I'm not aware of any, no.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any communities that do that or that's available.
So you're saying there's no state contracts available for tagging on like other services?
I haven't seen that done for consultants, no.
Okay.
JJ deals with the state, he does a lot of purchasing that way.
Specific projects is all that type of thing, not.
I know a couple people up at GOA that I can call and ask around and see if there's something that is available. If there are state guidelines or again, you get buying power by putting a number of communities together rather than just one.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how that, I mean,
For
the
specific
board
projects,
still has to appoint an attorney and an engineer.
Yeah, I guess we're spending, the point is though, we're not checking what we're spending. We're spending a lot of money here and comparatively, we're not, we're not sending it out for bid. We're not, how do we know we're getting a great deal or not getting a great deal? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I have a good idea on, the legal rate we're paying, I know is low. But certainly, I take direction from if the board wants to, there's nothing that says we need to go out if the board is happy with, if it's a costing that you want to check, we can do that. If it's a performance thing, we can discuss that.
I don't think it's a performance thing. I think if you put it out for bids, then you also specify you want somebody that has 30 years of municipal experience, not graduated from law school yesterday.
Otherwise, I apply.
No.
We'd have to get a new laptop.
Well, I guess I just want to add, it's not as simple as just, going out for bids. People spend time on putting a proposal together.
Right.
Are we going to go through an interview process and, they're going to call me and ask, is this, they're going to see so-and-so is there for, 20 years, 30 years. Is this something that the board is really considering, or are you just looking for information on cost? So I guess we just want to be clear on that, so we're straightforward with people. But
For the rate we're paying for the legal, it's gonna be very hard to find somebody else to come in under that, let alone with the experience, let alone with the personal experience with the village. So that's,
Yeah.
at least,
And if you're gonna do apples to apples, that's the way you gotta do apples to apples, yeah.
the other consideration is certainly for professional services is not, it's not a low bid situation. So, you know, in fact, the board can, you certainly can take the low, but the board can do whatever you want. It's not a, public construction is the only low bid type thing.
you know, even if we do find somebody with less of an hourly for the legal side of things, it might take them twice as long.
No, I get that. Or what happens if you bring them in-house?
Yeah. I think we might have talked about that, just not having enough work for somebody.
We don't have
in-house.
enough work for a full-time attorney.
Yeah.
But it would cost us less than $200,000 a year, I would guess.
Well, some of that's being charged back, though. You
A
have to
large
look at
part of
the
that
real-
is being charged.
And couldn't we keep that into village funds rather than to an outside firm?
We can't, well, bottom line is that if you're working for the village as a lawyer or an attorney, you cannot be practicing law and charging out fees. I mean, you'd have to look at how you'd actually be able to charge out some sort of expenses, but you can't. The bottom line, the village of Cottage Grove cannot be a law firm. Okay? Cannot. So we may have a fee that you would pay when you come to the village to annex or whatever, and we try to cover costs, but we cannot be just charging out. Cannot be practicing law
Is
as
there
a village of
conflict
Cottage
there,
Grove.
obviously?
What?
There's a conflict then,
It's not a conflict. You cannot practice law.
as an administrator.
Lawyers have to practice with other lawyers
Okay, yeah,
or
I got
by themselves. They cannot practice as part of and be charging out the community for their work and having the village benefit from that.
Right, good.
I mean, I may be wrong on that, but I think that's.
I don't know enough, at least, to add anything to that, but, you know, I'd like to say, we're not in the land business, we're not in the law business.
No, I'm not suggesting that we're charging out, or that we're saying, come to Village Cottage Grove, we can do your law work for you. What I'm saying is we're spending a lot of money on a service that, you know, when you look at our budget, it's a lot of money.
What we also don't see in this is all the times that our present attorney reaches out to another resource, because if he is an in-house attorney, then anytime he reaches out to another resource, it's going to cost the village.
Yeah.
And it's very common with in-house counsel. I sold to attorneys for 5 years, and one of the groups I sold to was corporate counsel, and first thing they do when they get a problem is they pick up a phone, and you know, and it starts, the meter starts running then.
So
So
something-
it doesn't mean all this would go away if we had it in-house.
Oh, I
Even though
get
we're
that.
not keeping them busy all the time.
At the end of the day, we need to be able to save the village, get the type of service,
Yeah.
and save the village money.
Yeah.
Save the citizens money, I should say, it's not us.
Something to add, and of course, Lee works, he's appointed by the board, works for the board, and I know he's asked every president he's worked for, he's told me this. So certainly, there's no requirement that Lee is at meetings, so, you know, if he's come because he's asked every village president, and the presidents wanted him there.
Yeah.
Certainly, that's up to the, the board if you want Lee at those meetings. As far as staff time,
Well, if we had them at every other meeting, how much, and just tried to push all the legal issues to one meeting, what would the savings be, rough? Any idea? Is it significant, or is it
I mean,
insignificant?
of course, depends on the meeting, but you figure, his prep, the prep time for that meeting, it'd probably be safe to say every board meeting is probably at least 5 billable hours with prep and follow-up and the meeting itself. So, what that comes out to about $700 maybe.
Per meeting?
Yeah.
As far as staff, so
I don't
we.
know, Mick, what do you think, of that idea? Is that just, is that short-sighted, is that just trying to save pennies?
haven't really put a lot of thought into it. I don't know, I mean, we definitely need a certain level of legal counsel. I don't know what's the most efficient way to do it. What's going through more of my mind is if we were looking at, I don't think the RFP or RFQ route really probably gets us where we want to go. I think the question more is whether we're looking at staying with outside counsel or doing something in-house. I mean, I just don't, going out for the RFQ or whatever, I don't really see us getting
Too many
more
moving
rates,
parts.
and then it really comes down, what does rate really mean anyway?
Right,
And it's
right.
really how efficient someone is, working. Yes, they do.
Just so the board understands how Lee's utilized by staff, staff, I ask them to save their questions, and Lee comes to, there's 2 staff meetings a month that he comes to, and that's when, we try to get all the questions answered. And then I touch base with him, 15-minute phone call, once a day, max. So that's, everything else is generated from either a plan commission meeting or board meeting or development itself. So.
And again, I'm not saying that Lee's done a bad job. It's a big ticket item that unlike, we're going to go out and get 3 bids on a computer, that's going to be way less money than we're spending on legal. That's all, that's the point I'm making. 2 different items. So.
Good point.
Well, and I think it's just good to have this information, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for putting it together.
I think we'd want to, if we wanting to pursue that on the cost, I think we'd want to kind of figure out what costs we really think could be covered internally and what costs we think would not be. I mean, so you kind of get that sense of which way really makes the most. I mean, if we want to look at it, I think we'd want to spend some more time kind of digging into it and figuring out just really whether there could be any sort of cost savings by going in-house. Bottom line, I don't know.
No, again, I
Answer
just,
that.
because it's such a big, those are 2 big ticket items, and when you start looking at money that the village is spending, even if we're passing some of those costs along to developers, whatever, it's still a lot of money. 200 grand is 200 grand. 350 or 400 grand is 350, 400 grand. Significant dollars.
How much of that's being paid by third parties, though?
Out
That would
of
be the
206.
what I call due froms.
78 is what came out of the levy.
Okay.
Is that right? That's right, Deb, right?
Well,
For legal, out of 207,000, 78, 1 came out of levy then for 2016.
Yes. Third party, it would be the next line down, the due froms.
Although we do get some revenue from municipal court to cover that portion. But
Yeah, I know.
yeah.
So,
But more or less.
okay,
less
so
correct,
71,680 came from the due
The
from. that's
developers.
Developers.
Yep.
Okay, so really, if you're taking, kind of the net to us then would be, if you take that out, is that kind of the net overall that?
And the utilities, yeah.
Yes, but you also have to keep in mind that some of his time is charged to the TIDS, some is charged to utilities, so that's not really, it's not hitting the levy. It's paid for by the municipality, but it's not taxed. It's not, we're
Some
not
is-
taxing the residents for that.
Some is almost overhead on the utility side, right? That, it's included in the rates covering those costs.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, if you- just purely looking at if you had in-house counsel versus outside counsel, you probably would, the due froms might be coming out, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say, I don't know how we would collect that. Maybe we could build that into some sort of the fees people pay when they come in and, file for annexation and whatnot, so we probably could maybe figure it out.
Yeah.
cover it.
Yeah, they're called impact fees.
Well, not technically, well,
Can't be impact fees. But
yeah, but really it would be a fee, the fees would need to be reasonable, but I mean, you could have a fee if someone's coming in that tries to cover your costs of providing the service.
Technically, we could charge for Aaron's time, my time, to developers. We, passports, I think that's come up and just decided not to, is to try to be business friendly on those sort of things. But for something as substantial as legal engineering, especially since if a developer knew that, they'd really lean on, those people. for that expertise, but.
Do we know any lawyers who also are proficient in forestry duties or park maintenance?
And they can run a plow too, yeah.
It's just, just give them a base salary and then split the time, whenever they're not doing legal stuff.
Would you
Treat
apply for that?
ash trees, plow, yeah.
I mean, I think you can figure out really how many hours he's putting in if you split, I'm not doing it right now, but taking his hourly rate and you divide it out, you could figure out how many hours.
Pretty close.
Currently.
There's a different rate for that we charge. Developers are charged 200
Yeah,
an
so
hour.
I would divide that part out, divide the other out by
Yeah.
160, and you basically have the number of hours that currently is being utilized to give you an idea how much, if you were hiring somebody, how much of at the same level of
Right.
proficiency.
And having in the village board meetings, it can be a conundrum, because then if you have something come up and you say, well, let's wait and table it because we don't have a lawyer here to ask,
Yeah,
then
that's bad.
the wheels come to a grinding halt.
Yeah. Goes home,
Yeah,
goes another month, yeah, or home another 2 weeks.
right.
Okay.
Anything else or anything?
Thank you, Jeff. Matt.
Okay.
So now at this point, if we wanted to have something added back in, like the electronic poll book, we make a motion?
Yep.
Or is it something we could wait until the next meeting? Or does that-
Well, we also had tomorrow booked in case we needed it, is that right, Matt, or is that?
We do.
So if anyone trick or treating, we can come back and revisit this, or we can get it done tonight. I guess that's kind of where we're at.
I only asked just because there was some outstanding information which might, influence.
On the poll books?
On the poll books and possibly on the new technology upgrades.
Yeah.
So,
But we wouldn't have the answers to that by tomorrow.
No.
Not the poll, I don't have the definite
right.
number on that.
I
We
mean,
don't
you
even
could-
have
I mean,
that
if
answer
you
by
could
December.
Start out with one and work your way up. You could do that. If it demonstrates its worth, then buy some more next year.
Okay. Get creative.
Hang on for just,
Yeah.
now the poll books and the laptops kind of go together though, right? In a way, because, or the poll book's very dedicated. Did I miss that? I'm sorry.
We don't know.
No?
No,
Okay.
I mean, you can either use laptops or tablets,
Uh-huh.
but what was proposed in the budget was laptops for department
yes.
heads, staff,
Right.
so kind of two different, and I
And
don't know
think
if they would
we're
be willing to give
fine
them
with
up
giving
for
up our
election day.
tablets, and
Yes.
We'd rather give them the
Absolutely.
ability to do their job.
Yep.
So, I mean, that could be part of the motion as well.
And if we approve, let's say, a lesser amount with the intention of trying to use our existing hardware and stuff like that, if we find it's not feasible, that just gets returned back to the general fund. How does that work if we don't end up using it, essentially? If we can't use it?
Yeah, it just won't be spent for that purpose, and technically it would go back into the overall budget, and if some other, if we had a bad winter and the plowing budget went up, it would probably eat some of those funds up. But if everything else met budget, it would go into reserves.
Would anybody be supportive of doing at least a partial funding of the electronic poll books with that in mind?
You said 5 or 4 year recommended, I mean, if we got 2 or 1 or just.
Well, I think Lisa said you can't really do partial.
You guys.
Well, I think you could do a partial in theory, because the people who would originally be divvied up into the separate letters, they could all just go into the general e-poll book, and it's not going to affect the other ledgers because they're not going to be voting twice, per se. I mean, I'm just trying to work it out in my mind. There could be a risk of duplicate votes doing it that
What are you
way.
thinking?
Well,
But-
here's the caveat of it. If you're using e-poll, the way that the statute is written right now, if you're using paper poll books, you have to have two, and you have to have people working that poll book together. If you have e-poll books, you have one. So we have to keep our numbers sequential in voting.
Okay.
So that's where I'm not sure how we would work that out on splitting that. So, but in the same token, in a smaller election, say April or a primary in February that will be happening this year, would be a great time because we don't have as many voter turnout, you know, usually, although I have a hard time saying that because in Cottage Grove you have great turnout. You're always in the high 80s as your percentage. So, but with that being said, I mean, you could use it at that time and see where we're at. We could see where, you know, what, by then we're gonna know what we need. And I'm really hoping, you know, if I don't have to buy equipment, I don't wanna buy equipment. If we have things that we can use, I'm really hoping that those tablets will be usable. So it may be the other equipment that's needed. So, I mean, it's just really up in the air at this time because I wish I had the answers
Sure.
for you as far as what is needed and what the cost exactly is going to be.
And I think that just makes our position on the board a little bit more difficult, just because we don't know what we're funding essentially, and we're not sure how it's going to be used and stuff.
Right.
Does anybody else have any feedback?
I guess the alternative I could suggest then is, I mean, this isn't best practice, but when sometime during or before the election, when you do know, maybe we're aware of somewhere else in the budget that monies won't be utilized, and you know, we'll go without here, or we're getting additional revenue there. You know, maybe we can find a way to justify it.
Right, if
In
somebody's
here.
under budget or
Yeah.
something, I mean, we could.
I think that's great.
I mean, it's not a huge dollar amount, and I would guess something will change in the budget that we'll be able to make it work, but we can bring it as an individual agenda item
Yeah.
when it comes closer to.
At the next meeting.
I guess in that case, I'd be comfortable just leaving it off the budget for now, as long as we have an opportunity to revisit it once we
Yep.
know
Yeah.
more about everything. So,
Okay,
Sounds good.
all right. Anything else that we want to talk about or change versus what Matt?
kind of want to call a revaluation vote right now while we're down. We had quorum at the beginning.
Oh, he's back.
Oh, man. So in a 50-50.
You're just gonna sneak in a vote while you're gone.
Yeah.
No, that's okay. No problem.
In
We're tie this way.
Yeah.
In a 50-50
Good
split
governance.
for adding something back on, it does not get
We're
added.
correct, if it ties, it dies on a motion.
Okay.
We had that debacle at Plan Commission last, so,
Well, then I guess I'm done.
okay. Nick?
I think I feel pretty confident we're gonna need to address the municipal building, although we don't have it in the budget, so I think that's something that if we don't put it in the budget this year, something we're gonna need to, unless we're gonna mothball space for the rest of the
Yeah,
year.
we don't need the mothball space because.
Well, we're gonna end
everybody
up
needs
spending
it.
something.
We'll swap it around somehow. We'll make
Yeah.
it, find some money somewhere.
Yeah, I think we need to have something in there, so.
By the time of the budget public hearing, Sean might have some quotes to pass along. He might not be with us with the.
It's not a horrible.
No.
Little surgery.
A knee surgery,
You can
but
swipe right on the screen. No, but, okay, I mean, that's.
so we could have that
We
information.
do need to make the best use of that space. Okay. I mean, at that point, I mean, we could then approve the preliminary budget that was presented and pending more information on poll books and things like that, if somebody wants to make a motion. Otherwise, I guess I will. I'll make a motion that we approve the proposed 2018 preliminary budget and with the notes that we're going to get more information on a couple of items, and those items will not be included in this budget unless we know that they're going to be useful for staff's research, I guess.
And I think we need to establish the date for the public hearing in that motion, which would be November 20th.
Is that our, okay. Well, that's second Monday in November, yeah. Okay. And I'll add on to that motion, present this budget at a public hearing on November 20th. Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Is that, how many opposed? I'm sorry. Two? Two opposed? Okay, motion passes 4 to 2 to present the 2018 preliminary budget for hearing on November 20th. Okay. Next item is adjournment. Anybody want to go home?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second to adjourn, non-debatable. All in favor say aye. Aye.